Let's say you made it. You finally sold your business. You find a buyer. The ink dries on a multi-million-dollar deal. The champagne is popped, and you are officially ready for your next chapter. But then months later, you get a letter. The government is stepping in. The deal is completely voided, and you might have to give every single penny back. And the craziest part, it has absolutely nothing to do with the health of your business. It is all because the person who helped you sell it was missing a specific piece of paper.
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any founder. You think you are crossing the finish line, but you are actually stepping on a legal landmine. What we are talking about today is this massive, largely invisible trapdoor in the world of business acquisitions. Most founders, and honestly, a shocking number of the advisors they hire, operate under this dangerous illusion that private markets are somehow off the books or immune to federal scrutiny. They assume that if they are not trading on Wall Street, the heavy regulatory machinery does not apply to them. But the reality is entirely different, especially when we start looking at the absolute necessity of a FINRA Series 79 license.
That is exactly where I want to start because there is this massive misconception out there right now. A lot of business owners and even intermediaries point to the M&A broker exemption that passed back in 2023. They wave it around like a golden ticket. The narrative was that this exemption was a massive win for Main Street, supposedly cutting through the red tape so everyday business brokers could facilitate sales without needing to be fully registered broker-dealers. But from what I understand, that exemption has some incredibly strict boundaries that are being, in many cases, ignored.
Ignored is putting it mildly. The 2023 exemption is treated by some like a universal hall pass, but it is actually an incredibly narrow legal corridor. Yes, it was designed to help Main Street, but it generally only applies to very straightforward, simple asset transactions. The absolute key condition, the catch that trips everyone up, is that the buyer has to be actively involved in running the business day to day after the sale. If you are selling your local manufacturing plant to a competitor down the street who is going to take over the CEO role and manage the floor, you might be fine under that exemption.
But that is not how the most lucrative deals are structured anymore, is it? The landscape has shifted. If you have a highly profitable business, your best buyer is probably not a local owner-operator.
Exactly. Your best buyer today is highly likely to be a private equity group, a syndicate, or a pool of passive investors. And the second you introduce passive investors, people who are writing a check but have absolutely no intention of managing the daily operations, that 2023 exemption vanishes into thin air. The same thing happens if the transaction involves complex securities or equity roles, which is standard practice in private equity deals. If your intermediary is only legally prepared for a simple asset sale, but your ideal buyer turns out to be a private equity firm, your unregistered broker is suddenly swimming in deep, highly illegal waters. They are completely out of their legal depth, and they are dragging you down with them.
So, to use an analogy, it is like hiring someone who has a license to fly a small recreational drone, but halfway through the job, the requirements change, and now they are sitting in the cockpit of a commercial Boeing 747 with absolutely no idea how to read the instruments.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And the scary part is, they might not even tell you they do not know how to fly the plane until the engines stall. This is why having a FINRA-registered investment banking representative specifically holding that Series 79 license is non-negotiable. It ensures that no matter how the buyer structure evolves, whether it is a straightforward asset sale or a highly complex equity deal with a massive private equity firm, the transaction remains legally bulletproof.
And the complexity does not just stop at the federal level, which brings us to another layer of this trap. Let us talk about geography and state laws because this is where a lot of people get blindsided. Let us use Ohio as an example since it is a prime case study for this kind of regulatory web. A broker might look at the federal guidelines, claim they are exempt, and tell the seller everything is perfectly fine. But federal law is only half the battle, right?
It is barely half the battle. This is a massive blind spot. Every state has its own set of securities regulations, commonly known as blue sky laws. In places like Ohio, these state regulations often precede or completely override federal exceptions. Just because the SEC in Washington, D.C. says you might be exempt under a very specific federal guideline does not mean you are compliant with Ohio's specific requirements for capital raises or business transitions.
So the state can essentially pull you over even if the federal government gave you a green light.
Precisely. If the state regulatory bodies find out that a transaction was handled by an unregistered party, they have the full authority to step in and blow the whistle, even if the SEC has not batted an eye. This is why you cannot just rely on a generic national approach. You need a team that intimately understands the local landscape, the specific blue sky laws of that state, and is fully registered for whatever complex transition might ultimately be required.
Let us dig into the mechanics of how people actually get caught in this trap, because there is a very specific tripwire here, and it revolves around how these intermediaries get paid. It is called the success fee. It sounds great on paper. The broker only gets paid a percentage if the deal successfully closes. It aligns everyone's interests. But legally speaking, taking a percentage of the final sale price is the exact thing that triggers the trap, isn't it?
It is the ultimate trigger. The success fee is the industry standard, but it is also the primary indicator for broker-dealer classification under the law. If someone is out there introducing buyers to your business, actively participating in the negotiations, helping structure the terms, and then receiving a fee that is contingent on the deal closing, the government views them as acting as a broker. If they are performing those exact actions without the proper licensing, specifically the FINRA 79 for complex deals, the trap snaps completely shut.
And the consequences of that trap are staggering. We are not just talking about a slap on the wrist or a small fine.
Not at all. The hidden costs are apocalyptic for a business owner. First, there is the refund of all fees. The unlicensed broker can be legally forced to give back every single penny they earned from the transaction. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. The real nightmare is deal rescission.
Which essentially means unwinding the entire transaction.
Yes. Unwinding a multi-million-dollar business sale is like trying to unbake a cake. It is practically impossible without destroying everything. If the intermediary was unlicensed, the buyer could potentially use that as leverage to back out of the deal entirely, or worse, sue for a complete refund of their purchase price months or even years later. Imagine having to somehow produce millions of dollars to buy back a business you already handed over simply because your broker lacked a license. And beyond the financial ruin, there is the reputational harm. Your business's name, your personal legacy, is now permanently tied to an SEC or state investigation. Good luck ever trying to access capital or sell that business again in the future.
That is a terrifying level of vulnerability. It really makes you think about the broader ecosystem of trust in the business world. Founders rely heavily on their inner circle, their CPAs, their wealth managers, their attorneys. If I am a business owner, I am probably asking my trusted CPA who I should use to sell my company. But this trap does not just snare the business owner and the broker, it creates a massive blast radius that hits those advisors too.
That is a brilliant point, and it is something that keeps smart attorneys and CPAs awake at night. This is not just a warning for the person selling the business. If you are an attorney or a CPA and you refer your highly valued client to an unlicensed broker, you are exposing yourself to catastrophic blowback. Your reputation is your absolute most valuable asset. If a deal you helped facilitate or referred gets flagged by the SEC because the broker was not properly registered for that specific transaction type, who do you think the client is going to look at for answers?
They are going to look right at the person who made the introduction.
Exactly. And the SEC will be looking at you too. Advisors are supposed to be the first line of protection for their clients. Sending a client to a licensed partner who operates with total integrity and compliance is not just about giving good advice. It is an act of professional self-preservation. If you recommend an unregistered broker, you are essentially guiding your client into a minefield.
So, how do we navigate out of this? If a founder is listening to this right now, maybe they are just starting to think about what their business is worth, or maybe they are actively preparing to hit the market. What are the concrete steps they need to take to ensure they do not become a cautionary tale?
Information and verification are your only shields here. First and foremost, before you sign anything, verify the broker's compensation structure and their licensing. Ask them directly, if my business is ultimately sold to a private equity firm or a group of passive investors, do you hold a FINRA Series 79 investment banking license? If they stutter, or if they try to tell you the 2023 exemption covers everything, walk away.
Because the buyer profile dictates the legal requirement.
Exactly. Second, check their communication standards. This sounds minor, but it is huge. SEC rules apply to everything: emails, text messages, internal chats. Does this broker have a compliance system for preserving all of these communications? If they are just texting buyers from their personal phone without a preservation system, they are not operating at an institutional compliant level. And finally, confirm state registration. Do not just ask if they are federally exempt. Ask about their compliance with specific state regulations where you operate. You have to ensure they are legally equipped to protect your legacy on all fronts. It
really comes down to the profound weight of what is actually happening during a sale. You are not just moving inventory or signing over a lease. You are transferring a lifetime of innovation, stress, risk, and triumph. To let all of that hard work, your entire legacy, be completely undone by a licensing technicality is a tragedy that is entirely preventable.
It is preventable, but it requires a shift in mindset. We have to stop viewing the legal and regulatory framework as just annoying red tape and start seeing it for what it actually is. The structural foundation that ensures your life's work actually holds its value when you hand it over. Cutting corners on the intermediary is the most expensive mistake a founder can make.
It is a powerful reminder that in the world of high-stakes business transitions, the details you ignore will always be the ones that cost you everything. The real question every founder needs to ask themselves before they sell is not just how much can I get, but do I truly know who is sitting across the table representing my life's work? It is a question worth answering carefully.